Another mistake that developers make sometimes is that they will actually go and store data to this private region on their device's data directory, but they'll go and store it in a way with permissions that allow it to be accessed by other applications. So by default, when you store data to an app's private data directory, it's associated with the user account of your app and set to a permission that prevents other apps from accessing it. But you as the developer have the ability to override those permissions and make it so that even though you save it to your private data directory, you give permissions to that file that allow other apps to go and access it within your private data directory. So in this code example here that we're looking at, we're actually opening a file and saving it to our private data directory, but we're saving it with mode world readable. And what this means is that any other app on the device can actually get access to that file, even though it's stored in our data directory. And you may think, well, this would never happen, I would never do this. Skype actually had a bug where incorrect permissions were being set on the SQLite database that they were using, and you can go and look at the details of this bug, but it exposed data and important settings from that app to other apps on a device. Now, here we see the actual case where they're taking this output stream that's been created, and it's been created world readable, and then writing the secret to the output stream and saving this data to the disk incorrectly. So if we look at the overall chain of events that took place from the developer's code that allowed this vulnerability to occur, is we start with a secret setting, so some data that we don't really want exposed. We then unfortunately begin saving it by opening an output stream to a world readable file, and then we actually write that data to that world readable file. And so anytime, like when we see external storage directory, we see mode world readable, we need to really think about, do we plan on having this data accessed by any other app on the device? Do we really want that? And if the answer is no, we don't want that data accessed by any other data or any other app on the device, that data isn't always something that should be public, then we need to go and rethink how we're saving that data. The way that we really should have been implementing this save settings mechanism, if we wanted to keep those settings private to that app, is we should have used mode private, which tells Android that that data is private to your application and should not be shared. So in this case, we actually are saving settings to the device in a way that other apps can't get access to. So if we see mode private, we should assume that that data that we're storing to that location will not be accessed by other apps. But what we do need to remember is that just because data can't be accessed by other apps on the device doesn't mean that it can't be accessed by other users on the device. Just because we're saving data that is not accessible to other apps on the device doesn't mean that the owner or whoever has physical access to the device can't see that data. And this, unfortunately, is a mistake that developers commonly make, as we've discussed, is they assume that something that is stored by their app that isn't visible to other apps is also not visible to whoever physically has the device. And that's not actually the case. If you are holding a device, there are lots of attacks and ways that you can, for example, root the device and plug it into your computer and look at an app's private data. So you shouldn't take anything that is your private data and store it in your app or on the devices of your users. If you give your app access to your own private developer data, you're then distributing that data to all of your users and essentially saying, I want all of the users of my app that I wrote to have access to my private developer data. Anything that you put into your app or give it at runtime, the user of that app or the holder of that device potentially has access to. So in this case, for example, doing something that's very commonly done and Amazon actually scans for now on GitHub and other locations, like storing your Amazon Web Services private key in your app or storing it on the disk of a device that your app is installed on. Even if you go and download that key after installation and store it, you're still exposing that private developer data to all of the users of your app. So you don't need to take data that belongs to you and is private to you and ever give it to your app or store it on a device that your app is installed on, even privately, and assume that it's safe.